again, Prelude people of the internet. Today I will be removing the carburetors from my 1986 Prelude. This is a Canadian spec model, so it will not be exactly the same in all areas of the world. For example, in the States, this whole area here is full of chambers and tubes and all kinds of crazy stuff, whereas in other parts of the world a lot of this vacuum stuff is not there at all. So anyway, it's a bit of a reference for the basics, to kind of give you an idea of what you're looking at. It won't be exact unless of course you have a Canadian model, and then it's exactly exact. So it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to point out a couple of things as we go, and we'll see how things go. But basically, we've got throttle cable right here that comes out. There's a couple of lock nuts right in here. If you actually spin the bottom lock nut all the way down to where the cable is, you can pull it up and slip it out this little notch right here. Makes it really easy. And then the most important thing really is labeling your vacuum lines, where they've come off of, what they connect to, so that when you go to put it back together, you have a solid idea of where everything goes. You need to look for things like this. I don't know if you can see that on the camera, but there's actually a split in that vacuum line right there, which could be causing me some headaches. So it's a good time to check those things out while you're taking everything apart. So I'm gonna have to fix that line. I think I can just cut it, and there's enough slack here that I can pull it back a little bit, so that's not a big problem. You will need to drain your coolant, because these guys right here are the coolant lines that feed your thermal wax case, and they do run coolant in them for choke functions, so you'll have to have coolant drained for that. And what else? Obviously your air box needs to come off. Air filter tube on that side needs to come out. The clutch cable can stay. You'll just kind of move it out of the way a little bit. It's not the end of the world. And yeah, like I said, the most important thing is just pay attention to where things come apart. I like to use blue masking tape and mark, numbers or letters or some combination, if it's something that I haven't worked on before. I'm not going to do that on this one because I've had them off about 150,000 times, so for me it's memory. But for you guys at home, you're going to want to mark like this, for example. Put a piece of tape on either side with matching numbers so that you know where things go. Just to make your life easier putting it back together. When you get on this side and you have this whole bank of vacuum lines that go over to this vacuum control box, if you put them in the wrong place, it's not going to be a good time. So I actually recommend not disconnecting those at all. They can actually come off with these like this vacuum manifold can all be lifted out as one piece and just laid off to the side. So that's normally what I do. It's a lot faster and easier to deal with. But anyway, let's get into it and start taking some stuff apart. So I was just removing these guys on the inlet to the carburetors. On mine there's a couple little rubber hoses that attach to the vents for the float bowl that prevent it from venting when the engine is off. On some other models they don't have that. On the US models I think there's actually like a more extensive version of that, so you'll have to just kind of see what yours looks like. Now on the bottom right here underneath the carburetors is a set of bolts that go up from the bottom. They are a massive pain to get to, but you cannot remove the carburetors, and specifically this plate, without removing those. Now I actually didn't put mine back in because I have these off so often that it didn't make sense for me to be messing with them all of the time. Now on this plate you've got a hose coming from this canister that comes down around the side and down in here. That needs to come off. I think I'm going to pop it off. Actually, I think I'll pop it off the plate side like that. And then on this side there's a couple of vacuum lines that attach that'll need to be popped off. Make sure you drop a few things, that always helps. You will need to disconnect these electrical connectors. They're for this little valve right here. Again, other models will be slightly different from different areas. Pull that wire down through. Now you see we've got a vent right here. That needs to pop off. And this electrical harness just clips into two little clips on the back of this plate. And then down at the bottom, there's two vacuum lines. So you can see here two vacuum lines and those two bolt holes that go in from the bottom. See, this one is actually broken off because it was rusted and seized, so that's why I didn't put those back in. But you should put them back in. They do support the front, or I should say the rear side of the carburetors from vibration, which can affect the boots down in here, the rubber boots that hold the carburetors. They can crack and stuff from too much vibration. But yeah, so once you get this plate off, those two vacuum lines, those are tricky. You may need to check those for damage. For example, this one is rubbing on something and it has a hole worn through right there, so I'll have to replace him and find out what he's been rubbing on. Okay, so once we have that off, I think the next step we'll do is these vacuum lines here. So this guy I'm going to pop out of this little clip, take him off of here. Remember, I got a crack right there, so I think I'm actually going to trim him right now. So that's done. If you don't repair those things right away, you should definitely make a note of them so that you don't forget them when it's time to put it back together. Okay, so we've got this big vacuum line here that needs to come off. And then once we undo the screws in this bracket, this whole assembly will lift right out, giving us better access to the throttle cable. So I think that's what we'll do next. As I've mentioned before too, a JIS screwdriver or screwdriver bit is the way to go. It has a special extra taper and a special shape, fits the screws properly, so you have less issues with stripping the screws out. Let's see if I can show you a little better here. It fits really nice and snug in there because it's the proper thing. This is JIS, stands for Japanese Industrial Standard. So you can identify it by this extra little taper in between each of the little sections of the Phillips head. That'll tell you it's a JIS. You may be wondering, why is my engine bay so filthy? This car is a driver, to be honest. I love it to death. It's a nice car in good shape, but I drive it like it's stolen every single day, so it gets a little dirty. And you know, it's no trailer queen or anything, so I don't mind that it's a bit dirty and not perfect, you know. Anyway, don't lose your little bracket. So now this just pops right up, you'll see, like this. And on the Canadian models, there's a vacuum line right here. It goes down to the power valves on the bottom of the float bowls. So that'll need to come off, as well as this idle boost solenoid here. On the American models, this guy actually comes from a set of pipes on the bottom, so this isn't actually there. But on the Canadian ones, we do need to pop that guy out like that and like that. And then just behind the EGR valve, there's a little vacuum port right there that goes straight down. We're gonna pop him off like that. And now this whole vacuum manifold goes off to the side like this. Now, one of the ports goes here, which comes to our choke opener. So we're gonna have to disconnect that, obviously, because that's gonna come out of there. Move our clutch cable a little bit. So this guy right here, this lower hose connects on the manifold right there, so we're just going to give him a little pop like that. And then this one here goes over to the thermal controlled vacuum switch on the thermostat housing. So I usually just pop him out of here, so it makes sense when it goes back together. So that covers most of that stuff. We can get this a little bit out of the way. So now you can see our throttle cable is right there, and these nuts are 12 millimeter. So I like to leave this one because it's your adjustment, and just loosen off the locking nut. And then if you spin it down, 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 down like this, there's actually a little notch where there's no threads. So if you screw this all the way down to the tip and then pull this guy up, it actually slides right through like that, which then lets your cable come loose. Now, the trick to get this out of the cable holder is to push the throttle open all the way so that the cable, the knob on the end of the cable comes up where you can reach it, and then just give it a wiggle and it comes out like that. You could also pull the cable to pull that up and then hold something on there to keep it from rotating back while you disconnect the cable. On these Canadian models, you can access all of the choke equipment on the side here, which makes it really easy. On American models, there's all kinds of stuff right here, so you can't really do that. So it's a little bit different. Okay, so our throttle cable is off. That's off. We need to disconnect our fuel line right here. Obviously, be careful when working with fuel. It is going to leak a little bit, so be mindful of that. Plus, your carburetors will be full of fuel, so when you go to remove those, they're going to dump fuel everywhere. So if you're not a proper shop, or if you have local restrictions on what type of liquids can be spilled, that sort of thing, you know, obviously follow your local rules and regulations. So fuel line is off. Now you can see the clamps right here and right here that hold the carburetors on. That's what clamps the rubber boot to the carburetor, and that's actually what mounts them on there. And you can see there's a little bit of like flex that they have. That flex is what I was talking about with the bracket underneath. That will prevent those from flexing like that when you're driving down the road, which could eventually crack these guys because they are a very hard rubber. Okay, so I think we'll do coolant lines, and to do that makes sense to pop off this big vacuum line that goes to the brake booster. You could even take it off from this side, I think. That was easier. So there's 3 coolant lines on this side actually, and 1 on this side. So there's your 2 lines for your wax case, and then there's 1 down on the side here for the carb warming circuit. So on the side of the carburetor is this guy. This one is toast, and most of them are, to be honest. They get all crudted up inside, and then they start to corrode. And inside of here is a big spring because it's a thermostat. And if this aluminum corrodes enough, it'll actually blow right off of there, and then all of your coolant will leak out on the ground. So I recommend bypassing this circuit, just taking the hose from the water pump inlet pipe and running a new piece along under the carburetors over to the other side and just bypassing it. If you live in a cold climate, though, you need to have water passing through that circuit to keep the carburetors from icing up in the cold weather. In my case, it never drives in cold weather, so it's been bypassed. But this would normally sit just down here, so you'd have to disconnect that water line. I had previously removed the coolant because I knew I was doing this job anyway. So normally coolant would be pouring out of there if you didn't drain it, but I had already done that, so that's not leaking. All right, so what's left? We got to loosen this guy and this guy. This one's pretty simple. Can be accessed from just right there. You want to loosen them up good too. So you want it to be nice and loose like that. And then this one's done from the side with not this because it doesn't fit. If you don't loosen these guys enough, what will happen is when the carburetor tries to come out of the rubber boot, it needs to expand the boot and it won't let it do it. So got to make sure those guys are open. Okay, so that's that. This is disconnected. There are a couple of electrical connections along the bottom and I think another vacuum line or two. But we can't get to those until we pull this guy anyway. There's also the lines that go to your charcoal canister on this side. So you've got a red fuel line that it's like a red braided line, and it goes down to your charcoal canister. It's basically a vent from the float bowls. So that guy gets popped off. And then there's a big round like vent port that comes off there too, but I think I'll wait till I pop these guys out to remove that. So to get these guys off, the best way is right down in here. There's a bump where the third carburetor would be on the older models. They never changed the carburetor bracket when they removed the center carburetor, but it gives you a nice little point of contact for putting some pressure on the carbs, and you can pry against the intake manifold and against that little button with like a pry bar or a crowbar and give it a wiggle, and these guys will come off. So I'll show you that right now. Trusty crowbar. So, angled end against the little button down in the bottom, and this guy just against the manifold, like so. And you just give them a wiggle. See, one side's out. And there we can see that comes off. And now, see right here is that water outlet that I was talking about in that circuit that I bypassed. Normally that valve, which is over here, is attached right here like this. So I have that removed, and this is the output. So there's a water line that goes over there. I have it bypassed with a piece of hose right here. Just goes under the carburetors and bypasses that circuit. So you can actually see here, you see this? There's fuel right in the throat of the carb. My carburetors are also in need of rebuild. It's been a couple of years since I had them off, and actually, well, not since I had them off, but since I gave them a cleaning and a rebuild. So because it does sit all winter long, it's 6 to 7 months in Canada that the car sits, so it gums it up. So they need a rebuild. Now, over here, you'll see this line right here is that large like vent port that goes over to the charcoal canister. And they all have those spring clips on them, you know, the standard Honda spring clip type units. There are better pliers for this than what I'm using, but this is what I have. So he pops off, and now we've got electrical connections for the choke heater right here. Just two little barrel connectors that have to come out. And then these couple of vacuum lines. So there's one here that points straight up. He comes off, and then there's one that goes over to the charcoal canister on the bottom. So we just slide that guy off. Oh, and the electrical connections right here for the fuel shutoff valve. That's like a safety shutoff in case of rollover. And that's it. Out. Now that's a little simpler than you would probably have it normally, simply because I've already drained the coolant. I have this bypass hose already installed. This big bracket here didn't have the bolts in it. So, you know, a few things that sped the process up a little bit. But essentially, that's the idea. Those are the basics of pulling that out. Now, you want to check your intake boots here for cracking. Let me actually bring you a little closer and show you. So if you look right here, see if I can get it to focus. Yeah, there we go. See that crack? It's not completely through, but it's starting. Same thing over there. You just want to make sure that that crack doesn't come all the way through, because that'll give you all kinds of running issues with vacuum leak and stuff. But yeah, so that's one thing to keep an eye on right there. What I've done sometimes is take these guys off, squeeze this to open the crack, apply some urethane in there, and then, you know, put some pressure on it, and it will glue it back up and seal the hole. Give you a little better view down in here. This is the mounting bracket. Two wires over here for the choke heater. Two wires down here for the shutoff valve. And then, you know, this vacuum line here comes straight up off those bottom set. This guy goes over to the charcoal canister right over here, right down there. This big line is your vent line, and then this comes off of the fuel system for your charcoal canister. So that's pretty much it for that. And then, like I said, checking for damaged things. So for example, right here, I noticed when I was trying to take this off, I didn't actually damage that. That was already damaged. So I'm going to have to replace that vacuum line, because that's going to be a massive vacuum leak and affect braking. So that's something to look at. And I think, if I remember correctly, yeah, this guy over here that goes onto the back of the filter plate has a big crack in it right there. So that'll have to be looked at when I put things back together. I was just noticing the inside of this is completely separated and has totally disintegrated. It's hard here, and the whole center core is gone. And if you look here, there's the rest of it right there. So this has completely disintegrated, and will have to be cut off and changed. So that was an interesting discovery that I was not aware of. And also, I wanted to point out this bypass a little better. So right down there, you can see where the line connects. There we go. Where the line connects to the pipe coming out of the back of the water pump. That would normally connect to that brass valve on the side of the carburetor body, and then it flows through and comes over here, and there's a water fitting right there that would normally connect to the output of that carburetor body. It's actually the front bracket has that water line in it. So I just took a piece of 3/8 line, passed it across, and looped that to just to close that circuit. Instead of putting caps or plugs or anything, I figure the hose makes the most sense, and it just keeps it from leaking or doing anything silly. So that's a quick, easy solution. Otherwise, I think we're it for now. When I do the reassembly, it's basically the reverse. I don't know if that's necessary to show, but I might film it just for fun. Maybe do a high speed on it or something. So that's it for now. If anyone has any questions specific to any particular part, let me know. Shoot a comment or an email. Hit me up off the website, something like that, and we will see what I can do to help you out. Until next time.